day, another Bruins game in the books.
Right here on the UCLA Bruins Audio Network.
But the conversation continues. Welcome to Bruin Talk, your post-game chance to react to the Bruins.
This is a special program.
And now, your host for Bruin Talk.
Time to talk about it with Bryan Fenley.
'Cause everything I touch turns gold.
Your host, Bryan Fenley.
Beaten down and bruised, both emotionally and physically, Bruin football going in the wrong direction in their hopes of steadily improving under first-year head coach Deshaun Foster, incurring a deflating defeat at the Rose Bowl in front of just about 43,000 people at the hands of number 8 Oregon, 34-13. On that note, welcome in. This is Postgame Bruin Talk. Yes, I am Bryan Fenley. You can follow me on X at Bryan Fenley, and we are a caller-friendly show, and we will be with you for the next hour. 877-520-1150. Give us a call. 877-520-1150. My wife is a therapist. I feel like that's the role I'm going to have right now with you for the next hour as we gloat over the game, my takeaways, my commentary, big picture, little picture, you name it. The Bruins are 1-3 on the year. They've lost 3 games in a row, and over the first 4 games, they have a total of 4 offensive touchdowns. The hard part about this particular loss is that what stings the most is that you really couldn't find anything to build off of in this game. If you're losing, but there's something that goes really well, you can drive home from the game and take solace in the fact of, okay, we did this really well as a team, albeit we lost, but you're going home and you're thinking to yourself, what was that? Considering the effort that UCLA showed putting up 17 points a week ago against LSU in the first half. The Bruins, by what they showed us tonight at the Rose Bowl, are not getting better in a lot of crucial places. The offense is not working right now, and there was no offensive touchdown for UCLA in this game. And there continues to be that prevailing notion of disconnect between quarterback and offensive linemen and running game and running the right routes. And I think that is what is most infuriating as a Bruin fan, because right now, UCLA cannot take advantage of their strengths. What is their strength? I would have to say it's the loaded wide receiver room they have. Well, sure, on paper that's the case. Then where was Logan Loya? He's the guy who made the last touchdown catch for UCLA. That was 6 quarters ago, late in the second quarter against LSU. The highest receiving pass catcher as far as yards in this particular game against Oregon was the freshman Quasi Gilmer. How many yards did he have? 34. Rico Flores Jr., 27. J. Mike Sturdivant, this is an NFL guy, soon to be. Not a single grab in this game, and your star tight end, Maliki Mataval, 1 catch, 21 yards, and you would have expected him to get the rock a little bit more, considering he's taking on his former team and the Oregon Ducks. The problem with this team right now is that I am as optimistic as you're going to find a Bruin fan. Look, I've got family ties. My mom went there. I love working for the university in some capacity. I've built relationships with players on the team. But optimism and realism are on opposite sides of the spectrum right now when it comes to the prospects of UCLA football. I want to expect a different result with each coming game, and that something great is going to happen for UCLA. But offensively, things are in a total rut. Either you do something different in the form of a system now, or you figure it out going into next year, because what they are doing right now is not working. And as Deshaun Foster, the Bruins head coach, said to Wayne Cook after the game, he said that his team would make a play and then they would take a step back. I feel like not only was that in-game the storyline, but in many respects, that's been the storyline from one game to another. Because I'm looking at UCLA, and the best half of football, hands down, was the first half against LSU. And I saw nothing in comparison to what the Bruins did the first half against LSU last weekend to what they were able to show on the field tonight. What did I want to see? Look, I'm judging this team beyond wins and losses, and I think the word rebuilding is a very, let's just say, popular term that fans are throwing around right now, considering where the team is currently. But I want to see improvement. And again, I go back to something that makes this loss so hard to grasp. It's that it's very hard to find things to take home on the drive back from the Rose Bowl and say, yeah, it didn't go well. We lost the game, but we finally got the running game going. Or, yeah, but we got J. Mike Sturdivant going. Like, I wish I could report those things to you, but I cannot right now. Running game has been a bugaboo for UCLA. And it was their second worst performance as a team, rushing yards-wise in the season. 24 carries, 47 yards. The lone bright spot had to be T.J. Harden finally ripping off two 10-plus yard runs. He did finish 13 carries for 53 yards, but I compare as a team the 24 carries, 47 yards tonight against number 8 Oregon, 22 carries for 14 yards against LSU. The best rushing performance for UCLA in a game this year was when they were beat by the most, by 29 points against Indiana, when UCLA had 96 yards on the ground as a team and 26 attempts. So the improvement not necessarily seen collectively from UCLA in the running game. I was looking at that going into this game. Yeah, win would be great, but I wanted to at least see some improvements in the running game. Hadn't seen that in the game. What about the pass rush? No sacks for a third straight game. And I love Kane Medrano. He is a heck of a talent, and at times he plays multiple positions at once. It's like he's got a bunch of guys piggyback on him as a defense, and he's running things. But he probably had his worst game of the year, and I think he would be the first to tell you that. And whatever Oregon did scheme-wise, they got to him. Kane Medrano is the best defensive player on this UCLA team. And yes, if you're going to carve up the quarters in this game where you are listening to Postgame Bruin Talk, I'm Bryan Fenley. UCLA losing at the Rose Bowl 34-13 tonight. You can say the Bruins did not give up any points in the third quarter. So you have that going for you. But Kane Medrano tops in the Big Ten going into this game in solo tackles per game at about 7 per contest. He's averaging as well 2 tackles for a loss per game. You barely heard his name called out by the broadcasters in this one. And then, to make matters worse, just to add on to the frustration for him personally out there on the field, he gets called for the horse collar, where ultimately Oregon had fumbled the football. Femi Oladejo picked up the loose change, ran into the end zone. All of that was wiped away because of the penalties. I go to the penalties again. Jalen Davies, great guy, but there was a key PI in the end zone that made a big difference for Oregon and allowed them to score another touchdown. And then my eyes were also intently watching the offensive line. Okay, the running game, not quite getting better. Yeah, there were signs from T.J. Harden, but overall, still a lot of progress that needs to be had. Pass rush, hard to find that, where Dylan Gabriel was just slicing and dicing at times the secondary for UCLA. But what about the offensive line? Were they going to give us a little bit more? And that's where another roadblock seemed to be persisting, and it didn't seem to get any easier for Ethan Garbers because of the offensive line. Ruben and EJ, he on that left tackle position is not going to want to take any particular play in this game and add it to his highlight reel. I hate calling guys out individually, but Ruben ultimately had to be subbed out of this game, and Ethan Garbers was getting mauled. And at some point, look, Ethan Garbers has shown us enough as we rate his performance in this game. 12 of 20 through the air, 118 yards passing, 2 interceptions. We know on paper, we've seen enough of Ethan Garbers going back to last year. You know he's a steady, sturdy, dependable quarterback. Is he a savior? I wish I could raise my hand and tell you, yes, he's the savior. He's being treated as if he has to be the savior, and that's a lot for him to ask. Too much for him to take on. And he is taking shot after shot to where, I mean, I'm looking at him back there, and I'm wondering, like, is the amount of punishment that he's taking from hits while he's thrown to sacks taken, is this going to impact the quality of his life post-football? If there's one thing that needs to get fixed faster than anything else, it's the O-line. And Garbers, you got to hand it to the guy. The man is a fighter. He's dealing with that ankle issue. He's limping, and he's trying to stay out there. Ultimately, he comes out of the game with like 9 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter. Justin Martin comes in, and he doesn't do a whole lot, but we did see a second quarterback in the contest for UCLA. UCLA's best drive was the 12-play drive offensively, which was their first drive of the game. They got into the red zone, and they could not get it across the goal line. They settled for the field goal. UCLA's second drive did not come until the second quarter, and early on in that drive, Ethan Garbers throws a pick, and it goes back to this miscommunication that has to be happening. I don't know whose fault it was. I don't know if it was a bad read for Garbers, if there was a miscommunication with the route runner and he was supposed to go somewhere that Garbers expected and that didn't happen or whatnot. But nothing seemed to really get gelled offensively after that interception, because the next 4 drives for UCLA ended in punts. Dillon Gabriel, 31 of 41 through the air, 280 yards passing, 3 touchdowns in the game. What haunts me about him is the fact that this guy was so close to donning the UCLA Bruin uniform. So close. I was listening to a podcast recently that Dillon Gabriel was on, the Oregon quarterback, and he said that he had his bags packed for Westwood. He was 24 hours away from getting into his apartment at UCLA, settling in, and taking over for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Of course, not only did he not show up, but then DTR came in for that 5th year. So we did get DTR for another year. But Dillon Gabriel was so close to being a UCLA Bruin. And that's disappointing and frustrating. I'm trying to take on, look, I'm an empath. So naturally, I take on other people's feelings. I can't help myself. I see a therapist for it. But I'll tell you what, it actually is going to help, because I know how you're feeling, and I want to hear what you have to say concerning this game. 877-520-1150. Coming up next year on Postgame Bruin Talk, I'm Bryan Fenley. We are going to take your phone calls. Yes, we're going to do that. I am going to sit here, and I'm going to be like the shrink in the movie, where I'm going to have my legs crossed and I'm going to have one hand on top of the other and a notepad. I'm going to say, and how does that make you feel? Something like that. This is Postgame Bruin Talk. More right after this.
The Patriot, AM 1150.
Your chance to react continues. Back to Bruin Talk on the UCLA Bruins Audio Network.
Postgame Bruin Talk. Bryan Fenley with you here, and we are soon to be taking your phone calls. This coming on the heels of UCLA suffering a tough loss to Stomach in the form of a 34-13 loss at the Rose Bowl against number 8 Oregon. And Deshaun Foster moments ago was at the podium in his postgame press conference, and he said he was asked about the improvements, and he said, I'm going to paraphrase a quote that he mentioned to the media here just moments ago. He said, we're improving, and we're just going to continue to improve and keep working hard, and eventually it's going to turn around. I don't have a doubt that it's going to turn around. It's just a matter of when. Right now, for UCLA, and I like to consider myself an optimist, and I wanted to think UCLA had a chance against Oregon tonight. But I also realized that to do that, the margin for error for UCLA was very slim. If UCLA was going to win, they essentially had to do everything well. They had to become not just the one-dimensional offense. They had to involve and integrate the running game. The defense had to be developing that pass rush. So all of these nuances that have been hard to detect in the prior 3 games had to all of a sudden show up. And on top of that, Oregon had to make just about every mistake. And then I thought UCLA had a fighter's chance. Do I think that it's always going to be like that? No. And when he says turning it around, here's what I thought to myself. This is going to turn around as soon as UCLA, and I believe Deshaun can do this, as soon as UCLA gets back to developing talent out of high school. The guy who used to be the head coach at UCLA for the last 3 years, his name is not Deshaun Foster, his name is Chip Kelly. It's a little bit of a hyperbole here, but essentially, to be reasonable with you, spent very little time trying to nurture and develop talent out of high school because he hit a couple of home runs out of the transfer portal, and he became enamored with going that way. Let's just stack our lineup with transfer dudes. Some of those guys work. And Zach Charbonnet, one of the many that has done incredible things at UCLA, but there are some that are not. And some of them are on the offensive line right now. And so it has to get back to something of let's go back and build up the program that's been gutted right now and go into those high schools and stack dudes, get talent, and go from there. Postgame Bruin Talk, Bryan Fenley with you. We've got callers waiting, and the longest holding has been JR in Redondo Beach. JR, you are kick-starting our callers here. Welcome to Postgame Bruin Talk.
Hey. A couple things. I'm not sure what's going on with Loya, but clearly his absence there is impacting the lack of offense. And I'm from the old school where if you made dumb penalties, the coach would pull you out of the game. I saw some real stupid penalties, especially the one at the end where the player, I think it was number 7, flipped the guy over. I don't know what's going on, but I do support the enemy and the rest of the staff there, but we have to get it together. In the interest of brevity, I'll hang up, and thanks for your time.
JR, appreciate you, as always, calling here on Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Bryan Fenley. UCLA losing tonight 34-13. To your point about Logan Loya, yeah, you weren't the only one that noticed that there was a significant absence in Logan Loya not being involved at all, seemingly, in the offense. Now, he was involved in punt returning. And to your point, like Wayne and Nick before me on the Bruin locker room report right after the game ended, they insinuated that, we don't know if there's something discipline-wise going on. And I thought to myself, like, if that's really what it is, then why is he returning punts? My speculation in regards to the Logan Loya saga right now and his status and why he wasn't involved in the offense is, to me, thinking that there's like two camps here. UCLA is 1-3. Mathematically, they can still qualify for a bowl game. By the way they have been playing, that is extremely hard to do. So there might be a certain faction who are ready to just play all the new guys. Let's see what we got. Let's get into full-on rebuild mode and go from there. And I don't want to say give up on winning because that's never going to happen, but allow more time for the younger guys to develop experience and think more long-term. And I see that a little bit with, look who led the team today in catches as a receiver. It was Quasi Gilmer, the freshman. So I think where you are, there's a crossroads here. It's somewhat of like an existential crisis. Is UCLA mathematically, again, don't take anything away from how challenging this portion of the schedule has been. LSU, Oregon, Penn State. Like, this is a gauntlet, to say the least. But with all of that said, I feel like there's this, I don't want to say discontent, but are we going all in on the youth movement? Or are we still trying to win right now and try to make a bowl and try to do the best we can? And I'm seeing sort of back and forth and figuring that out. And I think that there is that sort of inner indecision of what they're doing. And Logan Loya not playing, to me, is mind-boggling just because of what he did. Look at his body of work. The guy led the team in receiving last year in yards. And then he had that miraculous catch in the end zone at the end of the second quarter against LSU. So Logan Loya, if the Bruins want to win right now, it's going to have to be a lot of Logan Loya involved. Continuing on here on Postgame Bruin Talk, let's go to Gonzalo, who is in Covina. Gonzalo, what's your takeaway from tonight?
How's it going, Brian? There's a lot of takeaway, but we don't have that much time to talk about it. But one of the main things I want to point out is, Ethan Garbers is not a game-changing type quarterback, and he needs a lot of help back there with the running game. I know the offensive line is in disarray right now, but I believe, and I've been saying this for 2 years now, that the guy back there that should be helping and should be in there touching the ball at least 15 times a game is Keegan Jones, because speed kills, and he does a lot of things on his own. He had one carry tonight for 8 yards. That's 8 yards to carry. We were in LSU last week. He had 3 carries for 22 yards, a little bit over 7 yards to carry. So you got a guy touching the ball that much and gaining that many yards. You should be going to him a little bit more often.
I'm totally with you, Gonzalo. I appreciate you calling. And this is the thing. I would even go back before Deshaun Foster, and I would say that Chip Kelly, and I've pointed this out on a prior Bruin Talk, that there was a tragic mismanagement of Keegan Jones in the rotation. Keegan Jones was on the doorstep of transferring, saying, look, they don't see my value. I'm going to go somewhere else. Then you lure him back in, and you said it. Yeah, the touches that he does get, he makes the most out of them. He even had 50 yards receiving against LSU. And so if you're going to say, well, the running game, from what we can tell from Eric Bieniemy, the offensive coordinator, is not as significant, is not as important as the pass game, then why isn't Keegan Jones getting more involved? The question could be, how good of a pass catcher is he? And is there a liability there? And when you see that he leads the team in receiving yards last week, you're then telling yourself, well, I don't really think there is a liability. I think Keegan Jones can get the job done. So to me, that is another one of those head-scratching moments where he is clearly the fastest guy on the team. And I just wonder, maybe the hesitation is, and it's not just him. I don't want to just solely pick on him, but the running backs what's the most, and I pointed this out in the first segment here, and this is Postgame Bruin Talk. I'm Bryan Fenley. I think the most important thing to fix, if I could fix one thing with this team before anything else, it is the offensive line. Nothing can happen if you don't have time. And it's not just Keegan Jones, but also look at the other running backs and think to yourself, yeah, I don't know how good they are in run blocking or even picking up, like TJ Harden. Again, not wanting to point him out, but he's looking at the tape, and he's whiffed on a couple of opportunities to block and pass protection. So maybe it has something to do with not playing Keegan Jones because of what the coaching staff feels about his ability to block, because right now they are in desperate need of people to help out, to give Ethan Garbers time. Time now to get it over to Gary. And Gary is a staple here, a caller on Postgame Bruin Talk. He is in Huntington Beach. He has been a Bruin fan for a long time, and I know he's got a few things to say after this one. Welcome, Gary.
Hello, Brian. How you doing? I think that right now we're actually witnessing some historic times right now. I mean, like I said, I've been going to UCLA games since 1969, and we always, even if we didn't have a defense, the Bruins could always score. And right now, they can't. I mean, it is just impossible. When you have an offensive line that cannot block at all, you can't say anything about the running backs, like you said, unless it's in the pass protection. But if they're getting hit as soon as they're getting the handoff, Ethan Garbers, he's a decent quarterback, but he is getting annihilated because there is no time to play. There's just no time to pass and look at anything. And then I cannot believe that this is the third game in a row that we have gone without getting a sack. Now, you look at college football all across the country. I mean, what was it, the small school that played Idaho? I mean, they had Gillen Daviau running all around. I mean, what are we teaching the kids during practice? I mean, I don't get it. And then I'm always hearing on the the shows that come on, the Bruin Bible and everything like that, of how good these players are. I mean, who are they comparing them to? The intramural teams on campus? I mean, I don't know. And I mean, I'm trying to keep my calm here because it's an embarrassment. And I'm just really just tired of seeing it. And I mean, at this point, they say, well, okay, we're running a gauntlet right now. Okay, I've gone to UCLA when we played Alabama and Michigan in the same year. We're 4-0 against these guys. We show up and play, but right now we can't. I mean, it is just it's impossible to figure out what's going over there. Like I said, Logan Lawyer, he's a great possession receiver. You see what he did when he gets into the game. He's in LSU. He catches everything, and then you come here, and then he's not used at all. I don't get it. I'm just lost for words.
I can feel your frustration, Gary. And we're here to vent. This is Postgame Bruin Talk. You can call in if you haven't yet. 877-520-1150. 877-520-1150. We'll take you here to just about the top of the hour. I'm Bryan Fenley, and we are dissecting the not just loss, but the way in which the defeat played out, I think, is most disconcerting. It's the most discouraging. Against number 8 Oregon, 34-13, UCLA loses. And I think Gary brought up a lot of interesting points. And the hardest part about this, I think, from Gary's perspective is I love all the content. I'm always watching the podcasts on YouTube, and I think there's a ton of them UCLA related, and they do fabulous work. But it's one thing to evaluate talent in spring ball, and that guy looks great, and you go to practice, and then to see what's not computing. And when I try again to take the temperature of the Bruin fan, what's hard is it's one thing if you don't have talent at all and you're losing. It's another when you know you have the talent, like the Bruins do, wide receiver-wise, and you could even argue Ethan Garbers to an extent, just considering how long he's been inside the program. And the talent is there, but the execution is not. That, to me, is mind-boggling. And I think it gets to the root of why, as a Bruins fan, these aren't just a loss that you can easily get over. These are losses that sting and will stay with you heading into the next work week. We'll take your calls, more of them, when we return. This is Postgame Bruin Talk. Bryan Fenley with you, trying to make sense of UCLA's loss, their third straight, as they fall to Oregon tonight.
The Patriot, AM 1150.
Back to Bruin Talk on the UCLA Bruins Audio Network.
Getting to your calls momentarily. This is Postgame Bruin Talk on AM 1150. I'm Bryan Fenley, reacting to UCLA football's loss at the Rose Bowl tonight, 34-13. Moments ago as well, UCLA center Josh Carlin met with the media, and he basically, and I'm going to paraphrase what he said here to the reporters when he was talking to them after the game, and he said as an offensive line, they failed miserably. He literally said, quote, "We failed at that miserably," close quote, in reference to protecting Ethan Garbers. He came out of the game, Garbers, with about 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter. His right ankle seems to be an issue. Coach Foster mum moving forward about the injury status of Garber, so that's something to keep in mind as UCLA gets ready to go to Penn State next Saturday for a 9 a.m. local time kickoff here against Penn State. I do want to mention something really quickly with Ethan Garbers. You just feel for the guy because he's taking so much punishment, and then there was a shot of him on the sideline after this game where he was asked, actually after the game, through Deshaun Foster, because Ethan had a towel wrapped around his head. You couldn't see his face. You couldn't see anything, his facial expressions at all. And there was a question that was asked, is Ethan in concussion protocol? And Deshaun Foster quickly in the postgame shot that down. I knew what was going on. Ethan Garbers is so prideful about this team. This hurts so much. He was crying. He definitely was crying under that towel, and he didn't want anybody to see him. That's how much this is hurting. I know it's hurting for our fans as well. Let's continue the calls. Tom is in Orange. Tom, what do you have for us here on Postgame Bruin Talk?
Hey, Brian. Thanks for taking my call. Obviously disappointed. What I've seen, just a couple of things from offense and defense. I'm really disappointed in Garbers. I've been by his side the whole time. He's playing like a newly freshman that hasn't even played college ball. And if it's the offensive line that's a problem, the enemy has to understand what he has. We don't have a backup. So do some short passes, some quick slants, mixed in with a running game to get the confidence going. He's got to recognize what he has. If it's trouble that he's trying to understand the new offense, they're going to have to figure out something to kind of, get some confidence for this team to get to the midseason where we could actually do the plays he wants to do. That's just my opinion. Now, defensive side, I think it's really horrendous. I don't understand for the life of me how these guys become coaches on this level, or even in the NFL. I've seen it not just with UCLA, but with every other team in football. When the cornerback's getting beat or the safety on the long ball, turn your head around when you see the receiver open his eyes and put his hands up. What good is it to just jump on him and get a PI call? Turn your head around.
Yeah, I get that. I feel you, and I remember, and thanks so much for the call. explicitly remember one instance of what you're talking about when Jalen Davies is basically on an isolation play in the end zone, and he looks back a little bit. He gets called for the PI trying to guard a guy who is much bigger in the end zone. Oregon would then obviously take advantage of the PI, and later on in the drive, they would score the touchdown. It's not a good sign when the defense is seeing most of its tackles. More of your tackles are coming from your secondary than just about anybody else on the team. And we saw a couple of big performances in the secondary. And when they're making most of the tackles, that's usually not a good sign for the line. I got to point out Brian Addison. Of course, he had the 96-yard run back for a touchdown. The pick, that was the first pick that Dillon Gabriel had thrown in the season. The Dillon Gabriel, by the way, I think he's a little bit overrated. And yeah, I know I sound cranky. I sound salty because he basically dominated us as the quarterback. But the guy is getting all this credit, and he can't throw it downfield. Everything is dink and dunk with him, and to his credit, it worked tonight. Postgame Bruin Talk, Bryan Fenley with you. Let's continue the calls. Brian is in Rancho Cucamonga. Brian, your takeaways from this one.
Hey, I was at the game today. Thanks for taking my call, Brian. Longtime listener of the talk show. I'm a big Deshaun Foster fan. I was at the Rose Bowl when he had 300 yards against Washington back in the day. So I really want to support him, but I don't think we've really set him up for success. I just don't think it was the right hire. Hiring a running back coach that's never had even offensive coordinating experience. And now at the end of the day, this falls back on the AD, Martin Drummond. I really want to know what's your take on how do you think the AD has done at his role. The energy of the fan base, I sit in section 16, 17. The fans are embarrassed. We really rushed this hire, and this is what happens when you let the players make a decision. We could have gone and hired somebody like the UNLV head coach. Look at UNLV when they just had their quarterback just go into the transfer portal, and they just dropped 52 points on Fresno State. They've got a dynamic college offense, and we're trying to run this pro-style offense with a guy that takes Bieniemy that was pretty much run out of the NFL. Bieniemy, this is like John Embry 2.0 in Colorado. This is what this is coming down to. And I'm sorry to be so negative, but something has to be done. Martin has to go, and I hope he's listening right now because he has done nothing. The only saving grace for UCLA is Mick Cronin. And Mick Cronin knows he wants nothing to do with Martin Drummond because he doesn't know. He's a terrible AD.
No need to sugarcoat what you felt there. I definitely hear what you're saying. And I think part of the issue is you say the Bruins had more opportunities or other options at getting a head football coach. The problem is that Chip Kelly had been perusing for jobs. Nobody wanted him. And then it finally opened up the OC job at Ohio State after the coaching hiring cycle. So a lot of guys were already set up going into 2024 with their established programs. So I push back a little bit when you tell me that there were a whole lot of other options coaching-wise. I also think that a big part of why Deshaun Foster was hired, we hire... When we make a change, we hire what that person before them wasn't, or they do something that the new coach does, or there's a difference, a stark difference. It's essentially what I'm trying to say. And what I mean is Chip Kelly could care less about going to donor events, boosters. He had nothing to do with the NIL. And when you know that the NIL game is something that UCLA has to get involved with and they have to get up to times with, here is Deshaun Foster, who loves this institution. He is going to go to those events. He is going to talk and schmooze and wine and dine with everybody to get people on board. But yeah, to your point, the blame game, it's easy to do. Too much is going on Deshaun Foster's fault. It shouldn't be that way. Look at what he took over. He took over from a coach in Chip Kelly who basically gave up in recruiting out of high school the last 3 years. He was put in a bad spot, and I think we can't throw a lot of flack at Deshaun Foster. I get it, you're frustrated. We all are. But you just can't pin it on that guy because he's the head of this team. The offense, yes, there is a disconnect, and if that doesn't change in a hurry, it's going to be hard to find another win. But if we're going to get a win, there could be some winnable games later on in the year, but Penn State is coming up on Saturday. We'll talk to you after that game. For Zach Alcalde, our producer, I'm Bryan Fenley. Postgame Bruin Talk.
The Patriot, AM 1150.